Molly had been getting a little suspicious. At first, it seemed like a simple, innocent oversight. The socks that were left on the couch, on the bed, or on the floor. Sometimes they just seemed to vanish, like they had a mind of their own. But then the disappearances started happening more often. It wasn't just one sock at a time either. It was pairs. She had asked her husband, Sam, if he'd misplaced a sock while folding laundry, but he swore up and down that it wasn't him. She'd even gone so far as to check under the couch, behind the dryer, and in all the usual hiding places, but the socks were nowhere to be found. Are we losing our minds here, or are we just really bad at keeping track of socks? Molly asked one afternoon as she stood in the living room, holding up a mismatched pair. Sam shrugged. Maybe the washing machine's eating them. You know, like those old stories. It's always the washer's fault, right? But Molly wasn't. Convinced. The washing machine was just fine. Besides, the real mystery was that the socks weren't disappearing in the laundry. They were vanishing after. That night, as she crawled into bed, she noticed something that made her pause. It was the faint sound of little paws padding across the wooden floor, a soft rustle, followed by a suspiciously high-pitched squeak. "Rufus," she muttered, half exasperated, half amused. Rufus, their fluffy little terrier mix, was a ball of energy, always bounding around the house with his wagging tail and puppy eyes. He had his fair share of antics, chewing on shoes, stealing pens, even attempting to climb the bookshelf to get to the treats Molly had accidentally left within his reach. But stealing socks, that was a new one. She turned to Sam. "I think we need a little detective work." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You're serious? It's just socks." "Socks, Sam," Molly insisted, holding up the mismatched pair. "We've gone through every drawer and every closet, and now I've found 2 missing pairs. There's something fishy going on." Sam gave her a skeptical look. "And you think our dog is behind this?" "Of course," Molly grinned. "Who else could it be?" The two of them exchanged amused looks, and it was then that they decided to do what any good sleuths would do: set a trap. The next day, after a long morning of work, they gathered their supplies, one laundry basket full of freshly cleaned socks and a camera. Molly placed the basket carefully near the front door, then grabbed Rufus and settled him in his bed with his favorite toy. "All right, Rufus," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "You stay here and be a good boy." Rufus gave her an exaggerated blink, clearly unaware of the scheme, before plopping down onto his bed. But just as Molly and Sam prepared to leave the room, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of tiny claws tapping on the floor. Molly turned slowly, pointing toward the laundry basket. "He's already on to us." The puppy had apparently decided that now was the perfect time to make his move. Rufus stood up and trotted over to the basket, with his tail wagging furiously, sniffing at the socks as if they were the most intriguing thing he'd ever encountered. Just as Molly was about to step forward to stop him, Rufus lifted his little head and, to her shock, grabbed a sock in his mouth and darted toward the hallway. Molly's eyes widened. "Oh my gosh, he's doing it again!" Sam grabbed his phone, turned on the camera, and quickly followed the little thief down the hallway, whispering, "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen." Rufus was quick on his paws, bounding into the living room and under the coffee table, where he sat proudly, the sock dangling from his mouth like a trophy. "Look at that," Molly said with a laugh. "He knows exactly what he's doing. He's stealing socks and hoarding them. Is he going to bury them like a squirrel?" Sam asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I guess we'll find out," Molly said, trying to stifle her giggles. The next few minutes were filled with a combination of snickers and muffled laughter as they watched Rufus carefully hide the sock under the coffee table before immediately grabbing another and running off to stash it behind the couch. He wasn't even being subtle about it. He was clearly proud of his little collection. Molly couldn't believe it. The little pup had turned into a sock bandit overnight. They watched, as Rufus scurried around the house, popping in and out of rooms, dragging socks to his growing pile. It was like something out of a cartoon, but it was also strangely endearing. "All right," Sam said finally, still chuckling. "This is ridiculous, but I'm kind of impressed. I mean, he's got skills." Molly smiled, a warm fondness blooming in her chest. "Yeah, he does. We've got ourselves a sock-stealing genius." The mystery was solved, but they couldn't help but laugh at how it had all come about. Their puppy had turned an ordinary household chore into an adorable, funny, and unexpected adventure. And even though it meant a few missing socks, they couldn't be mad at the little guy. He was just doing what puppies do, being mischievous, curious, and full of life. As the night wore on, Rufus finally grew tired of his game and curled up in his bed, the socks he'd managed to collect tucked in a neat pile around him. Molly and Sam exchanged a look and sighed in unison. "Well," Sam said, grinning, "at least we don't have to wonder where the socks are anymore." Molly smiled, walking over to Rufus and gently retrieving the socks. "He's got a future in forensics," she mused. Sam nodded, reaching down to pat Rufus's head. A little thief with a heart of gold, and just like that, the mystery was solved. Though with a puppy like Rufus, they knew they'd probably have plenty more mysteries to solve in the years to come. The next morning, Molly woke up with a fresh cup of coffee in hand and a mind still buzzing from the previous night's discovery. Rufus, their little sock-stealing mastermind, had fallen asleep with his loot tucked safely around him like a little treasure hoard. Molly had half expected to find the house overrun with socks by now, but when she stepped into the living room, she noticed something odd. Rufus's little pile of socks, which had been scattered around the coffee table, was now neatly arranged in the corner of the room, like a misplaced art installation. There were socks from two different drawers, one bright pink with white polka dots, and the other a mismatched pair of athletic socks, side by side in perfect order. "Well, that's strangely organized for a puppy who's usually just chaos." "On four legs," Molly said, raising an eyebrow. Sam walked in behind her, yawning and stretching as he rubbed his eyes. "What's going on?" Molly pointed at the corner where Rufus lay in his bed, curled up in a ball, with an air of innocence that only a puppy could pull off. "He's been busy again. Looks like we've got a sock collection, Sam. A real full-blown collection." Sam, still half asleep, squinted at the socks. "Wait, did he sort them by color? This one's in a neat pile and that one... It's like he's got a system or something." Molly shook her head, bending down to inspect the neat little sock piles. "He's definitely more organized than I thought. I don't know if I should be impressed or concerned." Just then, Rufus yawned and stretched his legs, giving them both a drowsy look as if he'd just woken up from a particularly good nap. Molly reached down to give him a scratch behind the ears. "Well, I guess you've been busy." Sam crouched down beside him, rubbing his belly. "Do you have an explanation for this? Have you been secretly taking sock organization classes, Rufus?" Rufus naturally offered no answer, just a happy wriggle and a wag of his tail. His eyes sparkled, as if he were proud of his work. "Well, if we're keeping score here, it looks like he's better at tidying up than either of us," Molly said, looking back at Sam. "This is definitely becoming a thing." Sam stood up and gave Molly an exaggerated look of disbelief. "Molly, I have no idea what we're supposed to do about this. He's like a sock-obsessed little kleptomaniac. What if he takes the whole basket next?" Molly chuckled. "I think he's getting smarter. We might need to rethink our sock storage strategy. I was planning to hide the laundry basket, but I have a feeling Rufus would still find a way to sneak into the laundry room." Just then, Rufus gave a soft bark, followed by a playful paw swipe at the pile of socks. Molly raised an eyebrow. "All right, buddy, what are you up to now?" She watched as he nosed around the pile, digging through it with determination, before pulling out one of her favorite fuzzy socks. His ears perked up in satisfaction, and he trotted off toward his bed with the prize in his mouth. Molly blinked. "Is he hoarding socks now?" "I think he might be," Sam said with a grin. "It's like a sock treasure chest. He's going to have to start charging us admission." They both watched as Rufus happily settled into his bed, his prize sock, resting next to him like a pillow. His little tail wagged softly, and he gave a happy sigh, clearly pleased with his accomplishment. "Well, I guess we'll just have to keep track of his loot," Molly said, sitting down on the couch. "Maybe we should put a name on his collection, something like the Sock Vault." Sam laughed. "Sure, and when we need to find a pair, we'll just ask Rufus to unlock it for us. Or we'll start charging him rent for all the socks he's taken," Molly teased. "That'll teach him not to swipe everything." Sam leaned back on the couch, smiling. "I have to admit, he's pretty clever. I wonder if he knows what he's doing or if it's just pure puppy instinct." "I think it's a mix of both," Molly said. "He's definitely playing us for fools, but at least it's a cute trick." They both sat in the living room, watching Rufus as he lay contentedly in his bed, surrounded by his sock collection. Molly took another sip of her coffee, still laughing at the absurdity of it all. "Maybe we should make a sock ransom system," she suggested. "We offer a treat for each missing sock. Maybe that'll help him give some back." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Are we really negotiating with the puppy now?" Molly grinned. "It's the only way to get our socks back." Just as she said that, Rufus jumped up, trotting over to the door with a sock still in his mouth. He paused, tail wagging as if asking, "What's next, human?" Sam and Molly exchanged a look, both silently agreeing. "We're officially at the mercy of the puppy," Sam muttered, half exasperated, half amused. "Well, Rufus," Molly said as she stood up, "you've got us wrapped around your little paw, haven't you?" With a final little bark of victory, Rufus turned and scampered out of the room with his sock, clearly feeling like the king of the house. Molly and Sam followed, shaking their heads but unable to stop smiling. The day after Rufus's sock-stealing antics, Molly and Sam began to notice something strange. It wasn't just that their socks kept disappearing, it was that other things started to go missing too. One by one, smaller household items seemed to vanish, only to reappear days later in the most bizarre places. A pair of sunglasses was found wedged between the couch cushions. A kitchen spatula turned up behind the bookshelf. But the most baffling discovery was the missing TV remote, which turned up inside a shoe under the dining room table. Molly couldn't help but laugh. "What's next? The keys?" Sam just shook his head. "I have no idea. I'm starting to think Rufus has become some kind of kleptomaniac mastermind. But at least he's not stealing food. Yet. Well, we've got to get to the bottom of this," Molly said, pulling out a notebook from her bag. "I've been keeping track of everything he's taken, but we're losing control here." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You're seriously tracking his sock thefts?" "Absolutely. It's the only way to figure out if there's a pattern. I mean, he's obviously got some kind of system. Why else would he start taking things other than socks?" Rufus, ever the playful puppy, had no idea that he was now the subject of a full investigation. He trotted into the room with his usual enthusiasm, a ball in his mouth. He dropped it in front of Molly, waiting for her to throw it. "Hold on, buddy," she said, patting his head. "We've got a mystery to solve first." Sam sat down on the couch, rubbing his forehead in mock exhaustion. "We've got a criminal mastermind in the house, and I'm the one who ends up doing all the sleuthing." Molly laughed. "Hey, you're the one who got us into this. You're the one who agreed to keep track of the sock thief." "You're right," Sam said, grinning, "but I think we need a new plan. If Rufus is taking things beyond socks now, we're going to have to catch him in the act." "Agreed," Molly said, her eyes lighting up with determination. "But how do we do that?" The two of them spent the next few hours brainstorming their next move, each taking turns offering ridiculous and hilarious ideas. They talked about setting up a hidden camera, using motion sensor lights, or even luring Rufus with a trail of treats to catch him red-pawed. Finally, they decided on a simple but effective plan. They would leave a few items, socks, keys, and a few small toys scattered throughout the house, then wait for Rufus to make his move. They'd need to be quick on their feet to catch him in the act. That evening, as the sun began to set, Molly and Sam set up their trap. They carefully arranged a few of their belongings around the living room, making sure to place them in plain sight. Rufus, meanwhile, was happily chewing on his favorite bone, blissfully unaware of the stakeout underway. As night fell and the house grew quieter, Sam whispered, "I think we're ready. This is it. Operation Sock Swindle is a go." Molly grinned. "Let's see how he does with this challenge." The couple settled in on the couch, trying to stay as still and quiet as possible. They waited, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Every so often they'd hear Rufus's little paws padding across the floor, but the puppy was acting unusually calm, as if he knew something was up. "Is he suspicious of us?" Sam whispered. "I think so," Molly replied. "He's too quiet. It's almost like he knows we're watching him." Suddenly there was a rustling sound from the hallway. Both Molly and Sam tensed, their eyes trained on the front door. Then they heard it, a faint sniffing sound. Rufus was on the move. "Here he comes," Sam whispered, holding his breath. Rufus padded into the living room, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He first approached the pile of socks, then sniffed the keys that were placed beside them. He cocked his head to the side as if assessing his next move. "Is he going to do it?" Molly whispered excitedly. Rufus seemed to hesitate for a moment, then suddenly, with the grace of a seasoned thief, grabbed one of the socks and bolted toward the hallway. Molly jumped up from the couch. "Gotcha!" But before she could even take a step, Sam grabbed her arm and pulled her back onto the couch. "Wait! Let him go! Let him go!" "But we've caught him!" Molly exclaimed. "Shh! Just wait a minute," Sam said, grinning, and so they watched, hidden in the shadows, as Rufus trotted down the hallway, carrying the sock in his mouth with the proudest look on his face. But to their surprise, instead of heading straight for his usual stash by the couch, he walked over to the laundry room, set the sock down next to a basket of clean laundry, and then turned around to grab a different item, a keychain that had been left on the entryway table. Molly and Sam exchanged a look of confusion. "Wait a second," Molly murmured. "He's not hoarding them anymore. He's swapping things." As if on cue, Rufus returned to the living room with the keychain in his mouth and placed it on the coffee table before grabbing a new sock and running off with it. He was literally swapping his stolen goods with whatever else was lying around. Sam sat back, a burst of laughter escaping his lips. "He's like a little kleptomaniac trader. He's swapping socks for other stuff. This is unbelievable." Molly shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe it. He's not just hoarding them, he's trading them." After a few more minutes of watching Rufus swap items, the two of them couldn't help but laugh. The sock-stealing mystery had turned into a full-blown comedy. Their puppy wasn't just a mischievous thief. He was running an underground sock trade, and they had no idea what to do about it. "Well," Molly said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes, "I think we've solved the case. And somehow, I think we've just created a sock dealer in the process." Sam shook his head, still grinning. Who knew a dog could have such a complex system of bartering? Rufus trotted back into the room, a satisfied look on his face, as if he were the most successful trader in the world. He dropped another sock at their feet and sat down, looking up at them with wide, innocent eyes. "All right, Rufus," Molly said, smiling. "You win. You're officially the king of socks." It had been a week since Rufus's sock-swapping activities had been discovered, and life in the household had settled into an odd but harmonious rhythm. Molly and Sam had accepted that their puppy had developed an entire sock-based economy. As odd as it was, they couldn't help but laugh at his antics, but while they had solved one mystery, another was just beginning to unfold. On a chilly Saturday, a morning as Molly and Sam sipped their coffee, the sound of frantic scratching at the door broke through the calm. "Who could that be at this hour?" Molly asked, her eyebrows knitting in confusion. Sam, already on his feet, gave her a look. "You're asking that as if we don't have an extremely peculiar puppy who's just spent the last week stealing socks." Molly rolled her eyes and laughed. "True, but I'm thinking it's someone who isn't aware of the sock crime spree happening in our house. And by someone, I mean someone who's probably about to knock." Rufus was already racing toward the door, tail wagging furiously. As usual, he assumed that any visitor meant a new adventure, and a new adventure often meant new socks. But this time the knocking was persistent. 3 loud, urgent raps. "I've got it," Sam said, making his way toward the door. When he opened it, there stood Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor from 2 houses down, holding a plastic bag in one hand, her face flushed with a mixture of frustration and concern. "Oh, good morning," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "I need your help. Rufus has done something terrible." Molly's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean, done something terrible?" Mrs. Jenkins looked at Rufus, who was now wagging his tail enthusiastically, as if he were entirely innocent of any wrongdoing. "Well," Mrs. Jenkins began, lowering her voice, "I woke up this morning to find my laundry room completely emptied. Not a single sock, not a single towel, just gone. I thought maybe I'd misremembered where I'd put them, but then I saw him, your dog, trotting down the street with something that looked suspiciously like my mismatched laundry pile." Molly and Sam exchanged a glance, both of them immediately understanding what had happened. "Rufus," Sam started, his voice filled with mock disappointment, "did you take Mrs. Jenkins's laundry?" "Again!" Rufus cocked his head to the side and offered a little bark, his tail wagging more furiously than ever. He was proud of his work, perhaps too proud. Mrs. Jenkins looked at him skeptically. "I'm serious. This isn't a small pile of socks we're talking about. It's my entire laundry load, Sam, my whole basket. And now it's all mixed up in your dog's little treasure trove." "Oh, no," Molly said, standing up quickly. "We'll get it back to you. Don't worry." "Well, if you wouldn't mind, it would be a relief," Mrs. Jenkins replied, still holding the bag. "You wouldn't believe the racket I heard this morning, and when I looked out my window, I saw Rufus running off with something that looked suspiciously like my favorite cardigan. It's not even cold enough for it yet, and he's got it." Molly and Sam both laughed, though they could tell Mrs. Jenkins was frustrated, and they didn't want to brush off her concerns. "Right. We'll take care of it," Sam said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Let me just make sure our puppy hasn't turned the entire neighborhood into his personal sock store." They walked outside, Rufus eagerly trotting ahead, tail wagging, as if he were leading them to his prize. Mrs. Jenkins followed behind them, her arms folded across her chest, clearly not sure whether she should laugh or scold. It didn't take long to find Rufus's stash. Just around the corner, nestled behind a row of bushes, was the little pile of laundry Rufus had amassed. There, in a heap, were towels, socks, shirts, even an old pair of woolen mittens. Molly bent down and inspected the pile, picking up a pair of Mrs. Jenkins's mismatched socks. "Well, he certainly went all out this time," she said with a laugh. "It's like a sock heist gone wild." "We have no idea how this happened," Sam said, shaking his head. "We were under the impression he was just gathering socks for himself. I didn't realize he was trying to start a whole black market operation." Rufus looked up at them, ears perked, as if proud of his haul. His tail wagged so hard that it seemed to be shaking the bushes around them. "I can't believe this," Mrs. Jenkins muttered under her breath. "I'll never get my laundry done again at this rate. That puppy's got sticky paws, I tell you." "Well," Molly said with a grin, "we'll certainly put an end to the sock-stealing spree. But how do you feel about a little trade? We can return everything, and maybe we'll throw in a new set of socks as a peace offering." Mrs. Jenkins raised an eyebrow, but then smiled. "Well, that sounds fair enough. I'll take the socks, thank you very much." As the two of them began picking through the pile of laundry, making sure to return every lost item, Sam leaned down to Rufus, who had just dropped a particularly colourful scarf at his feet. "I know we've talked about this before, but seriously, buddy," Sam said, scratching Rufus behind the ears, "if you're going to start taking other people's laundry, can you at least keep it to the mismatched socks? I mean, a cardigan. Really?" Rufus responded with a happy bark, clearly not understanding the gravity of his actions, but enjoying the attention all the same. "Well, at least it's all in good fun," Molly said, looking at Mrs. Jenkins. "Thank you for being so understanding." Mrs. Jenkins let out a laugh. "I can't stay mad at that little face," she said, looking at Rufus as he trotted back to the bushes to grab one more sock. "But next time, you better lock him up when I do my laundry." Molly and Sam both chuckled as they made their way back to the house with all of Mrs. Jenkins's belongings safely in hand. They couldn't help but reflect on how quickly Rufus's sock stealing had evolved into a neighborhood-wide phenomenon. "Well," Sam said, looking at his puppy with a grin, "at least he's got a good eye for quality socks. Maybe we can turn this into a business venture." Molly rolled her eyes playfully. "Let's just make sure he doesn't start a full-on laundry ring. I've got enough chaos around here as it is." As they closed the door behind them, Rufus trotted over to his bed, plopping down with a sigh of contentment. He may have been a small puppy, but in his little world he was clearly the king of the sock trade, and for now at least that was enough for all of them. Life returned to a new, albeit chaotic, normal after Rufus's little laundry spree. The great sock heist had become a neighborhood legend, with Rufus now known not only as a mischievous puppy, but also as a resourceful little entrepreneur who had no problem acquiring and bartering items from anyone within a 5-block radius. While Molly and Sam initially worried about how to stop Rufus's sock-swapping antics, they soon realized it was an impossible task. His antics had taken on a life of their own, and while it wasn't quite the quiet household they had envisioned, they were at least becoming experts in the fine art of sock retrieval. One evening, after a particularly busy day at work, Sam walked into the living room to find Molly sitting on the couch, scribbling furiously in her notebook. "What are you working on?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Rufus was sitting at her feet, happily chewing on a stray sock. "Is that a plan?" Molly looked up from her notes and grinned. "I think I've figured out how to capitalize on Rufus's little sock-stealing operation." Sam blinked. "Capitalize? What, you mean like start a business from Rufus's sock thievery?" "I've been thinking about it," she said with excitement in her voice. "Rufus has clearly built up a reputation as the best sock thief in town, and when you think about it, he has an amazing collection of items. Why not create a socktioneer service?" Sam stared at her, processing. "A what?" "A socktioneer," she repeated, the smile widening on her face. "A dog-led sock marketplace, a barter system where people can exchange their mismatched socks for whatever Rufus has acquired. It's genius." He took a moment, trying to suppress his amusement. "Wait a second. You want to turn Rufus into a sock dealer? Like a sock-slinging pup who trades socks for treats, toys, or whatever else he can carry off?" "Exactly," Molly said, clearly in her element. "Look, people already love him. They think his antics are hilarious, and there's a market for mismatched socks. People will pay to get theirs back or exchange them for a new set. It's like an underground economy, except Rufus is the mastermind behind it all." Side of the operation. He was content with the simple act of sniffing out the best deals, receiving his treat, and trotting off with his next prize. One afternoon, as Rufus was overseeing the transaction of a particularly large pile of socks, Molly overheard a conversation that caught her attention. "Do you think Rufus will ever run out of socks?" a neighbor asked. Molly smiled to herself and walked over, catching the end of the conversation. "He's never run out yet," she said. "Rufus is a resourceful pup. If he needs more socks, you can bet he'll find a way." The neighbor laughed, looking at Rufus, who was now seated proudly in front of his stash, waiting for the next trade. "I never thought I'd see the day when a dog would be running his own sock business, but I guess Rufus is full of surprises." Molly couldn't help but agree. Rufus had gone from a mischievous puppy who stole socks to a savvy business dog, running a thriving sock exchange. It was one of the most unexpected and entertaining turns their household had taken, and it was only getting better. "Who knows?" Sam said, coming over and leaning in the doorway beside her. "Maybe one day Rufus will have his own storefront. The sock-chenier empire could be just getting started." Molly laughed, looking at Rufus. "One step at a time, Sam. One sock at a time." And with that, Rufus, the little dog who had once been a kleptomaniac puppy, had truly found his calling. It was a few months after the great sock-chenier had officially taken off, and Rufus's sock-stealing days had become a distant memory. The small operation had evolved into a full-blown business, one that was the talk of the neighborhood, and then, astonishingly, beyond. Word of mouth had turned Rufus into an unlikely celebrity. Molly and Sam sat in the living room, enjoying a quiet evening together, when the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. Rufus, of course, was the first to hear it, and shot up from his bed with his trademark enthusiasm. "I'll get it," Molly said with a sigh, smiling at Sam as he stretched his legs out in front of him. "Rufus is probably expecting a new shipment of socks." She opened the door, and standing in front of her was a young woman, holding a phone in her hand, her eyes wide with excitement. "Hi, are you the owners of Rufus?" she asked breathlessly. Molly raised an eyebrow. Yes, that's us. I'm Molly, and this is Sam. What's going on?" The young woman's eyes sparkled with recognition. "I've been looking for you. I'm Casey, and I work for a lifestyle blog. I heard about Rufus's sock exchange from my friend, and I had to see it for myself. We want to feature Rufus in our next post." "You've got to be kidding me. It's genius." Molly blinked, not sure if she was hearing things correctly. "Wait, you want to feature Rufus in a blog post?" Casey nodded enthusiastically. "Yes! Rufus's sock-chenier is the most innovative thing I've heard of in ages. We've covered everything from pet businesses to quirky startups. But a dog-led sock exchange? That's next level. We'd love to do a feature story on Rufus and his operation, maybe even take some photos." Molly exchanged a look with Sam, whose mouth was hanging open in surprise. "Well, I don't know if we're ready for a big story about this," Molly said, glancing at the sock-strewn living room. "It's just been a fun neighborhood thing." "I get it," Casey replied quickly. "But that's exactly what makes it so special. Rufus's sock-chenier isn't some corporate idea. It's grassroots, it's fun, and it's totally original. I think people will love it. We could help spread the word nationwide. Imagine Rufus as a national icon. He could even have his own line of socks." Molly and Sam exchanged another stunned look. They never imagined things would reach this point. They'd been content with Rufus's little sock business, but the idea of taking it national and potentially launching a whole line of branded merchandise was a bit overwhelming. I don't know," Sam said, rubbing the back of his neck. "This is all moving so fast. We didn't plan for Rufus to become some sort of sock mogul." "Well, you're sitting on something really big here," Casey said, with a wink. "You can either keep it small and quirky, or you can take Rufus to the next level. Let us help you." Molly was still processing the idea when Rufus trotted over, tail wagging, dropping a mismatched sock at Casey's feet. "Looks like Rufus has already signed his first autograph," Sam said, chuckling. Casey laughed, bending down to pet Rufus. "He's already a pro." Molly glanced at Sam, who shrugged as if to say, "Why not?" "Okay, let's do it," Molly said, smiling at Casey. "We'll work with you, but we'll need to keep Rufus's brand authentic. We want him to stay the same mischievous, lovable pup." Casey's eyes lit up. Of course. We'll make sure it stays true to the sock-loving dog that he is. You have no idea how excited I am about this. That afternoon, Molly and Sam sat down with Casey to discuss the details. They agreed to a feature that would highlight Rufus's rise to sock supremacy, as Casey called it. The story would cover how Rufus started with a few mismatched socks and turned it into an operation that helped bring the community together, one sock at a time. The next few days were a whirlwind. A photographer arrived to snap pictures of Rufus in his element, sitting proudly in front of his sock collection, handling transactions with his signature enthusiasm, and even conducting business in a tiny makeshift office that Molly had created for him. Rufus was a natural in front of the camera, showing off his best sock-stealing charm. The photos were adorable, and by the end of the shoot, Rufus had gained his first taste of fame. But things didn't stop there. Within a week of the blog feature, Rufus's Socktioneer exploded. People from all over the country were sending in socks to be traded. Some even offered to pay Rufus in pet treats, toys, and rare socks they'd found online. Rufus's reputation as the Sock King was cemented. Soon after, Rufus had his own website, featuring an online sock exchange where people could trade socks virtually, and Rufus's official line of merchandise, Rufus's Sock Exchange, where every sock has a story, was born. It included everything from mismatched socks, of course, to dog-themed apparel. Molly and Sam were amazed at how quickly everything had taken off. The once small operation had now become a nationwide phenomenon, with Rufus starring in blog posts, social media videos, and even local news features. One morning, as Sam scrolled through their email, he came across a message that nearly made him drop his coffee cup. "Molly, you won't believe this," he said, reading aloud. "Rufus has been invited to appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert." Molly's eyes widened. "You're kidding me." "I wish I were," Sam said. "This is real. They want Rufus on TV." The next few weeks were a blur of excitement. Rufus was invited to appear on talk shows, participate in interviews, and even host a charity event where he would auction off some of his most coveted socks. The Socktioneer was everywhere, and yet through it all, Rufus remained the same lovable, mischievous pup who had started it all. He continued to entertain the neighborhood, bringing in more socks, wagging his tail, and keeping things fun and light-hearted. As the weeks turned into months, Molly and Sam reflected on how far Rufus had come. What started as a harmless habit had turned into a nationwide phenomenon, all thanks to one clever little puppy who loved socks a little too much. But no matter how famous Rufus became, they both knew one thing for sure. Rufus was still their puppy, with a heart full of joy and a penchant for stealing socks, and they wouldn't have had it any other way. Months passed, and Rufus's sock empire continued to grow at an astonishing rate. From his humble beginnings as the neighborhood's favorite sock thief to becoming the face of a sock-centered phenomenon, Rufus had achieved what no dog could ever have dreamed of: a legacy. His Socktioneer business was now a household name, with a team of volunteers running the operations, a fully functional website, and a chain of retail locations selling Rufus-branded merchandise. He'd appeared on national talk shows, made headlines, and even appeared in a viral commercial for a well-known pet food brand. However, through all the excitement, the fame never seemed to faze Rufus. He was still the same mischievous puppy, now a little older, who loved nothing more than to chase after a stray sock or curl up in his bed after a long day of business dealings. He'd earned his reputation, but at his core, he was still a puppy who just wanted to play. Molly and Sam had made sure to keep him grounded, literally and figuratively. They made sure he still had time for the small things he loved, like playing in the backyard, chewing on his favorite squeaky toy, or snuggling up for a nap. They never let the fame get to his head. One Saturday afternoon, while Rufus napped in his bed, Molly and Sam sat at the kitchen table, discussing how to balance Their lives, with the success of the Socktioneer, they knew they needed to keep things fresh, to prevent it all from feeling like a business rather than a fun venture. "I think we should hold a Socktioneer event," Molly said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "A big community event, where people can bring in their mismatched socks to trade, and we can have games, food, and just make it a fun day for everyone." "What do you think?" Sam raised his eyebrows. "That sounds like a great idea. Rufus has become this huge name now. Why not use his fame for something good? Plus, we've been talking about giving back to the community." Molly smiled. "Exactly. We've been so caught up in all the fame and the business side of things that we've forgotten to focus on what made the Socktioneer so special in the first place: Rufus's ability to bring people together." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. They wanted to create an event that would not only celebrate Rufus's rise to fame, but also encourage community involvement and the spirit of fun that had always been at the heart of the Socktioneer. The event, which they called the Great Sock Exchange, was scheduled for the following month. They invited friends, family, local businesses, and even people from out of town to come and trade socks, swap stories, and enjoy a day of entertainment. When the day of the event arrived, the air was filled with excitement. Rufus, dressed in a custom Socktioneer sweater, was more than ready to be the star of the show. The event took place in a large community park with booths set up for different sock exchanges, games for kids and adults alike, and an area for people to show off their most unique socks. There were contests, food trucks, and live music. Local artisans sold sock-themed merchandise, and the community was buzzing with the fun energy that had always been the backbone of the Socktioneer. Rufus, of course, was the main attraction. He moved from booth to booth, accepting socks, trading them, and spreading his charm with every wag of his tail. People lined up to take photos with him, and he graciously posed, even giving out paw prints for a few lucky fans. He'd become more than just a celebrity. He was a symbol of fun, joy, and connection. The highlight of the event came when Rufus made his big announcement: Rufus's Sock Charity. For every mismatched sock collected at the event, a matching set of socks would be donated to homeless, shelters, and families in need. The idea was to show that the Socktioneer was not just about trading socks. It was about bringing people together and making the world a little warmer, one sock at a time. As the day wore on, the crowd grew. Children ran around with socks in hand, eager to make trades. Adults sat and chatted, swapping stories about their favorite socks and reminiscing about the good old days of mismatched laundry. Molly and Sam watched from the sidelines, proud of how far Rufus had come. They'd turned a small, silly idea into something that had positively impacted their community, and as they watched Rufus interact with the crowd, they realized that the most important thing was that Rufus had remained true to himself. Despite all the fame and success, he still loved the simple joy of a sock in his mouth and the satisfaction of making people smile. At the end of the day, as the sun began to set, Rufus sat on a stage in front of a crowd, his tail wagging gently. The local news cameras were rolling, and the crowd was buzzing with excitement. Molly grabbed the microphone and stood next to Rufus. "Thank you all for coming out today and celebrating with us. This has been such a wonderful experience, and we're so proud to see how much this community means to all of us. Rufus has taught us that a little bit of fun can bring people together in ways we never expected." Sam added, "And this is just the beginning. We're excited to keep growing, to keep connecting with people, and to keep giving back to our community. The Socktioneer is about more than just socks. It's about spreading joy and warmth, one sock at a time." As the crowd clapped and cheered, Rufus gave a little bark of approval. His job was done, and he had done it well. That night, as the family settled in for a well-earned rest, Molly and Sam reflected on the day's success. The event had been a huge hit, And Rufus had proven once again that he wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of community, joy, and connection. Molly looked down at Rufus, who was already curled up on his bed, his little paws twitching as he dreamed of his next sock adventure. "You know," she said to Sam, "I think Rufus is more than just a sock hero. He's a reminder that even the smallest things can make the biggest difference." Sam smiled, watching their little pup sleep soundly. "Yeah, he sure is. Rufus will always be our sock hero." And with that, the Socktioneer's legacy lived on, not in the fame, not in the merchandise, but in the hearts of the people who had been touched by a mischievous pup and his love for socks.